guest. We're really excited to have you here today. My name is Michelle. I'm one of your hosts. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Tracey, and my pronouns are she, they.
So, yes, as I noted, we're very excited for you to be with us today because we have a very special guest with us in conversation. Today, we're joined by Ginger Scott, whose pronouns are she, her. And Ginger is an award-winning author and autism advocate who's going to have a really interesting discussion with us today about her disruption journey. So as I noted, right, Ginger Scott is a USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and Amazon best-selling author from Peoria, Arizona. She's also been nominated for both the Goodreads Choice and Rita Awards. And she's an author of several young adult and college age romances, including recent bestsellers like the Fuel series, the Varsity series, The Hard Count, A Boy Like You, A Girl Like Me, Crybaby, This Is Falling, and Wild Reckless. And as a side note, if those titles and series like annotations don't jazz you up, I don't know what will. So run, don't walk to Ginger's authorship. She's also a sucker for a good romance. Ginger's passions, though, are sports as well, and she often blends the two in her stories. She has been writing and editing for newspapers, magazines, and blogs for a hella long time. She has told the stories of Olympians, politicians, actors, scientists, cowboys, criminals, and even towns. For more on her and her work, you can certainly go to her website. It's at www.littlemisswrite.com. That's LITTLEMISSWRITE. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. Now, when Ginger's not writing, the odds are high that she's somewhere near a baseball diamond, either watching her son hit bombs or cheering on her favorite baseball team, the Arizona Diamondbacks. Ginger lives in Arizona currently and is married to her college sweetheart, whom she met at ASU. Fork 'em Devils.
Oh, that's awesome. And I have to say, I have to also talk a little bit about how I know Ginger and such an amazing human being. I've known her. Well, we go way back, Ginger, way back, all the way back to, when I was a police officer and you were working in marketing for the city of Glendale at the time. And I used to go in and go into, it was back when I was kind of the spokesperson for the department. So I spent a lot of time in the city offices and got to know Ginger in the marketing department and absolutely adored coming and like bothering you at your desk. You would always be over there in your desk, focused on work. And we got to know each other and become friends. And it was interesting. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about this, but I remember at some point you telling me about your dream of writing a book and how you had that dream for so many years. And then you made the mistake of telling me, because then every time I came in uniform, I was walking up behind you asking you, when are you going to write that book? And I also want to give a shout out to your husband, who I think is an amazing human being. So I got to give a shout out to Tim, even though this podcast is about you. I got to give Tim a shout out and Carter a shout out, your son. I know how instrumental Tim has been in helping you live your disruption story and being such a support and such a hero for you. And so I got to give a shout out to Tim. And I feel like I have a little bit of piece of that too, where I was, pushing on you a little bit to disrupt. But tell us what disruption means to you. And, I think there's also a quote we pulled, and I'll read it. You got this amazing quote that we love from you that says, you can't disrupt without being okay with being uncomfortable, because it's in that moment that you really learn. So I'm so great. It's so great to have you on the podcast, and tell us what disruption means to you. And again, shout out to Tim. I know he's going to appreciate I did that.
Yes, Tim loves attentions. My husband is notoriously like shy away from he likes to work on the back end. So well, first of all, I will get to disruption, but first of all, thank you guys so much for having me. This is an honor, especially to be a part of this journey that you guys are putting together so early on. I'm honored and thrilled. And yeah, the first time I met Tracey, I think I was forcing her to take an uncomfortable headshot for becoming the PIO. Because I ran the digital media department, and my partner and I usually took all the headshots, and we forced Tracey into getting one done. So
Maybe we can find that headshot and put that in the show
Oh,
notes too.
no.
We might be able
No.
to. Yeah, I do have a hard drive
Mm-mm.
with a lot of things on it. So,
Oh.
I like it.
Oh, boy.
but Tracy was very much there at sort of the inception of me taking a leap. I had, I'll get into this more later, but I had this dream of being a writer from childhood, but it was just sort of this thing percolating that was like one of those, like, oh, some people get to do this, but not me sort of dreams. She was one of a collection of voices that kept telling me that, no, it's okay to give this a try. Just give it a try. Just, see what happens. But getting back to the point about disruption, I love the name of this podcast. And I actually, as I was thinking about your question on what does disruption mean to me, I kind of like had an epiphany. I just thought about this last night. So in sports, which I grew up playing all kinds of sports, and my son is an athlete now too, we often use the words disruption. And I had a coach who used to say this to me in softball, and he would say, get in there and be disruptive. And
Mm.
it was, when I was going to an at bat, and it was usually what that meant was go do something unexpected that changes the game, something
Mm.
different, something unexpected that changes the game. Don't they are a machine that's just wearing us down. Let's get in there and let's be disruptive. Let's do something unexpected. Let's switch this momentum around. Maybe in softball, maybe that was laying down a slap bunt that got a runner on. In volleyball, maybe it's
Mhm.
a tip, something that just changed the function of the game and sort of all of that momentum. And I think that kind of applies here,
Mm.
because I think that's very much what disruption is in terms of life and how we all sort of coexist with each other. We can be going on this sort of same stagnant plane of being accepting the status quo, or we can lay down a bunt and change things up. And I think that's what disruption means to me. And I think when I sent you that quote, I think you have to be okay with being uncomfortable. And I think a lot of the national conversation that is happening, I think a lot of the resistance to it is some people don't like to be uncomfortable. No one likes to be uncomfortable. It's hard. I
Mhm.
don't like to be uncomfortable. But once you tell yourself, okay, this is going to be uncomfortable, but that's okay. And maybe if I just listen, I'm going to get some really great tools that are going to make me a better person. So
Mm.
for me, that's what disruption is. So,
Mm. I love
I
that, and
love that.
I love the fact that you connected disruption to baseball and to sport. I'm not surprised by
you're not
that.
shocker,
I
right?
know, I know, shocker. But I love that, get in there and do something that changes the game. Like I love that. And I love how, one, coaches and particularly people who have encouraged us have had such an instrumental, influence on our lives. But I love that the way you describe disruption really fits. And I also think you're so right about being, there's something about becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable, and
Hmm.
how when you become comfortable with the uncomfortable is when you really start elevating and creating impact too, I think, in
Hmm.
Yeah.
spaces, not just learning and listening, but it really is connected to action as well.
100%.
Another way to think about comfort is often status quo, right? And if there's
Hmm.
something that we need not more of now, I think it's that, that sitting back in status quo, but instead we all need to get out there and be disruptive. And I think your sports analogy is brilliant. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking of ways that we can weave that into some of, like what we put out. But another thing I just wanted to highlight, and it's something that both you and and Tracy both touched on, is another theme we talk about here is really providing our disruptors, right? Those that are listening in and on this journey with us, just that element of permission, right? Sometimes it just takes those voices in our lives saying, yeah, you should try this. Like, why not? Or you can do this. Or it takes that coach, right? Saying, get in there and lay down that bun, be disruptive to really put you in that space of almost like comfort in being disruptive. So I love that.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I know Tracy mentioned my husband being really instrumental in me kind of taking this leap. But just to kind of weave into my story
Mhm.
and my background, I had wanted to write a book since I was 11, 10, since I knew that it was something that, people did, that they weren't just these magic things that showed up in the library. There was a person behind them. And I grew up reading Judy Blume, and I read Judy Blume chapter books when I was, old enough, maybe not old enough, 11, 12. But I remember reading those, Are You There, God, It's Me,
Mhm.
Margaret, and Forever. And it was the first time I read books that reflected me and my friends and all of the weird anxieties that go along
Mhm.
with coming of ageness and navigating a sexual relationship and navigating relationships period, in high school and beyond. And it just, I thought to myself, oh my God, if I could
Mm.
just write something like this that a girl like me would find one day and see themselves and relate to it. But I also grew up in the practical household where oh my gosh, you got to get a paycheck and you got to have some benefits, hon. So, I went the journalism route, which was, fantastic because I love storytelling. And I worked at a lot of different publications in Arizona. Journalism is the one career that I think is about as difficult to be in as educating, because there's a lot of people that want to tell you how to do it,
Mm.
and and a lot of people that just automatically don't like you for doing your job. So it's it was difficult to maintain sort of that fire in my belly for journalism, for a very dismal paycheck. So and I was married to a teacher, so we were bringing home two very dismal paychecks. So I switched to marketing, which was a fantastic choice because I got to tell stories for things that I believed in, which was a lot of fun. And I think all of that helped me really kind of hone my craft. But there was still this person inside me, this little girl that wanted to write her own book, that wanted to put a book on a shelf. And I had this book that I had started that I spent maybe 10 years, just every now and then I'd break it out and I'd write another half a chapter. And every year I would put it on my goal list for, I don't really make resolutions, but I make goal lists. I would say, okay, this is the year I'm going to finish my book. This is the year I'm going to do it. And then finally, one year, my husband said, the only thing stopping you from doing this is actually writing the damn thing.
Very deep, very
And
deep.
I was like,
True.
that's a harsh point, but very valid and true. And you were, and he made me take 2 days off of work. He said, I want you to take 2 days off of work a month, and I want you to do, not for like getting things done and running errands, but I want you to just do nothing but like sit and write and see how it feels. And I remember going into work, and I'm driving into work, and he calls me and he says, okay, you're going to put in your time out or your time off request, right? Because I was not very good at taking vacation either. And I said, yes, I am, I promise. And I took those 2 days off and I spent them writing, and I wrote so many words, and I got hooked into that story I was creating, and I didn't stop. And I would come home from work and I would sit up until 3 in the morning and write. And every now and then I would take a day off, but I would, until I had it finished. And it's just because he believed that I could do it, and that, that when it was done, I could share it with people and that people would read it. I just wanted 17 people to read it. That was my goal because I figured I had like a bubble of 16 friends.
I
So
love it.
if I had 17 readers, that means I broke the bubble, and that like the word of mouth was working. And I think I had maybe 3,000 downloads of my book the first month it was out. And that was, yeah, that was, I don't even know the word for it. I'm speechless. That's really rare. But it was affirming, I guess. And just so our first check that we got, we paid the electric bill with it, and we were super excited. And I was like, I'm going to write a sequel. I'm going to write a sequel. And we're going to pay the cable bill. It's going to be great. And it just kind of kept going until I was making enough off the books to match the day job salary. And I really loved the environment of the book world so much more than the environment I was in marketing, and working in, kind of a government setting. And I loved the no rules, being my own
Mm.
boss concept. And my husband said, do it. If I could write something, I would do it, but I
Mhm.
can't. So you should do it. And he said, and I believe in you. And the worst case scenario, if the books dry up, and, you'll get a different job and it'll be fine. And that was 10 years
Ooh.
ago. So
And you've wrote like how many books now? 30 something?
30,
30,
Wow.
35.
35
Yeah.
books later. Look at that.
My
Yeah.
goodness.
36 is on my computer right now.
I love it. I don't personally know Tim, certainly like you do, or like maybe Tracy does, but I feel like I love him as well. So he sounds completely amazing.
He's a pretty good one. Yeah. I did well.
I love it. I remember, Ginger is also just such a beautiful person at finding the right time to kind of give advice too. And she's always been a friend. And I remember talking to. I love how this is becoming about Tim too. Tim's gonna really love this. He's gonna be like Tracy Breeden. Did you tell Tracy she could bring me up that often? But I just I remember that my own journey of kind of finding my person, and Ginger knew very right away that she had found her person, and she gave me some advice when everybody has advice on relationships and everybody has advice on your person and what that is. And Ginger gave
Mhm.
me the advice I've never forgotten, and she said, you will know it in that it will just be easy. There'll be something very easy about
Mhm.
it, and it'll be this flow, and it'll be this easy flow, and you'll know it when you feel it. But I remember her talking about how
Mhm.
easy it would be, because people talk about all the time how hard relationships are. And not that there isn't difficulties, not that there isn't those
Right.
things, but I just remember Ginger giving me that, and I was like, that's the first time anybody's ever told me that. And then seeing, spending time with her and her husband and seeing the love that they share and that connection, you definitely could see the easy flow that they have together. They're definitely made for each other, I think.
He is my best friend. He is. And it is funny that you bring that up because we will be at dinners with people or parties or something, and people will talk about marriage is so hard, and we'll kind of look at each other and we're like, is this supposed to be hard? I don't know. Are we doing this wrong? I don't know.
I love it.
And I just, and I do know I'm lucky and I feel very fortunate that I found that person, but no, it's, we've had hard things, but we've done the hard
Mm.
together. So it's never been hard like this, it's been sort of
Mhm,
cohesive. So
I like that. I like that. It's we've done hard things. It's like
yeah,
people will be like, "Oh, marriage is so hard," and we're laying there like, "Oh, can't wait to like get space from this person," or there's always some kind of language like
yeah.
that. But to hear it communicated in that it is, yeah, there's hard things, and we've done those hard things together. So beautifully said, Ginger. Beautiful.
Shocker that our award winning author would say things in such a beautiful way.
Oh, you should hear me when I say things totally awkwardly and they come out. It's the other problem is sometimes I don't know when to not speak, and so then I'm still talking, and then that's when my husband and my friends are like, "Why are you still talking?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's just coming."
Love it. Love it.
Well, speaking of difficult things, I don't know if we should
Mhm.
transition now a bit into, frankly, Ginger, some of the topics that you do discuss in your writing, right? Some of the themes that you bring
Yeah.
up, which are some of the more difficult themes, even in the context of adult conversations in literature, right? Much less literature that is geared
Right.
towards young adults and teens. I think some of the themes that that are apparent in your writing are topics like mental health issues, right, poverty, addiction, and
Mhm.
even violence. I think, in my
Mhm.
perspective, and you can certainly correct me, but I think these are also themes again that are a little bit atypical, right, to find in more of like a
Mhm.
romance novel approach. And so,
Mhm.
what would you tell us about your personal interest, your desire in addressing those tough topics for this kind of
Yeah.
audience that you're geared towards?
Well, I'm going to go back to that beginning of me being this 12-year-old girl who found a copy of Forever. in a Goodwill when I was with my grandmother. My grandmother used to go and she would get like old shirts and ties to make quilts out, the fabric. And she would just load up on fabric and she'd give me, like $1, go find something. And I remember I found the book Forever by Judy Blume for $1. And I was like, oh yes, I've always wanted to check this out. And I got it. And it wasn't like one of those Operation Win the Boy's Heart, like it wasn't, it was just very, like, very real. It was very real. And I remember reading it and it just feeling like I was reading my friend's diary. And it felt just like my own life. And that stuck with me. And so when I was writing my first book, the one thing that I just kept hammering home was keep this real, make it realistic. And it might mean that some of the choices I made, like, Prince Charming, it was sometimes a toad. and just and didn't say the right things because a 16-year-old boy isn't gonna have it all right away. And he's got some growth to do, and he's gonna be an a-hole. And so I tried to, like, remember, like, to make sure that I made some of those hard choices in writing the narrative. And probably more than any book I've written, that first book, which is Waiting on the Sidelines, is the one that I get the most emails about from people. And it could be, I get a lot of teenagers, but it's also, like, I like to say, teenagers my age who remember being that girl and being that age and going through some of these things. And they tell me about how real it felt and how it took them back to that setting in their lives, in those moments. And I think teenagers today are dealing with so many things. They're dealing with mental health. I know for a fact that high schools have drugs in them, and it's a constant battle for administrators and parents. And how do you message and teach your kids how to make the right choices? But these aren't things that are invisible. They're there, and our youth is dealing with it, and us as parents are dealing with it. So why wouldn't I put it in a book, in the narrative that I'm telling? Usually, with the romance, a lot of that is about relationships more than yes, I love a good kissy scene myself. I love the swoon, but I also love the relationships. And I try to write not just the relationship between my hero and heroine, but I build a sort of a world of friends around them. And so my books tend to really kind of dive into all of those different relationships, and that person you can trust and that person you can talk to, and just all of the nuances that go along with having good core groups of friends, and having, finding a person that you can count on through some difficult things. I grew up in a neighborhood that had a lot of gang violence. It was, those of you that might be in Arizona, in the Maryville area. So it was just an amazing neighborhood. I loved my childhood so much. I loved where I grew up, and there were families that had been there for years and years. But I had a lot of people that I went to grade school with that by the time I was in high school made the choice to be in a gang and were in prison, or were in juvie. And it just that was the reality. And there were a lot of my friends that were experiencing that same reality. So when I kind of craft story ideas, and I think I usually have sort of what kind of challenge is my character facing? I don't shy away from those hard things. That was a really long answer. I'm so sorry.
No, it was beautifully put, and I think it, again, it helps to really frame. I mean, I think what I see as being a disruptor in this space, is that how you see it too, with your willingness to tackle some of these issues in such a real and honest way? Do you find that as part of, kind of your disruption opportunity as an author?
Definitely. It definitely is, because it can spark a lot of conversations, which I think conversations are a key to growth.
Sure.
Yeah, conversations, I love it when I hear that I have moms and daughters reading books together. That's so exciting to me. Even more so, it's to my son's mortification. Some of his teammates have read some of my books because I write a lot of sports romance, and they're like, "Oh, yo, your sports were on point." um, but that conversation that comes after is special, and that's that builds the relationship, and that also is an opportunity to learn about each other, to learn about things that you might not have at the forefront of your mind. It's definitely, a disrupting thing. And it's, like I said, you have to be okay with being uncomfortable. I know sometimes when I put certain things in my books, there's some people that won't like it. And criticism is hard. It's very hard. I have heard people say before, no, I love criticism. I don't. I don't want everyone to be happy and to love me and to like think that it's all perfect. But I also know that that's silly to think that that would ever happen. I have to be okay with knowing that I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that's all
Mm,
right. That's all right.
yeah. I think it makes me think, you're out there very much in the public. Like
Mhm.
it's, yes, there is probably much more opportunity for criticism or those type of things than there probably has been so much in the past. And
Mhm.
how do you kind of navigate that? And I think I just admire you for taking this kind of genre and really writing about difficult things and helping people know how to navigate that, young people know how to navigate that. And
Right.
it's wonderful that you're also having impact on all ages. I remember when I read your first book, that's what I was so impressed by, and then the conversations we've had about really touching on some of those difficult topics. How do you navigate the difficulty of also just being more in the public eye than you've ever been in your
Yeah.
career?
Social media has created, wonderful opportunities and wonderful, wonderful problems. Like it just, it is definitely the yin and yang. It is, the good and the bad goes together. Because yeah, I can reach people with my stories, and this has been maybe the hardest thing about the author journey is there's a lot of platforms for people to really hate. And it's as someone who I think maybe my biggest hurdle in taking the leap to become a writer and to put a book out there was this fear of rejection.
Hmm.
So putting it out into this, atmosphere where there's lots of public platforms for people to reject you is hard. And I have come across things where people are, it's one thing to say something that you didn't like about a book or its style or, my writing style and even my story. But sometimes it can get really personal. People can like take it to just a nasty place that they don't need to go. And I have worked really hard and I've learned how to sort of put up blinders to not let myself go down those rabbit holes, to hear that and to see it, because it's not going to benefit me. It's only going to make me feel bad. It's only going to make me question myself. And I will take criticism. I will take it in and try to learn from it. But when it crosses that line to being just hateful, that's sort of where, all of my buzzers go off and they're like, nope, nope, back out. You don't need to read this or watch this. Just,
Hmm.
shut it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, that was some of the challenges. I know that as Michelle and I talked about, even doing this podcast, or me, being very open and raw about your stories. I mean, being, in the queer community, like there's just so much hate around that. And knowing that we would be going out publicly and potentially, amplifying what could be the response to us, right?
Mhm.
And that's also connected to that fear of rejection, being a part of
Mhm.
a community that's been rejected over and over again, even in your youth. And then it's like, why do I want to put myself out here to, expose myself to the hate that I know that's out there, the continuous, facing that rejection and that fear of rejection. It's been, I think, a hurdle just for me to step into this place. It wasn't easy. I think some people just assume that, oh, it's easy, and that's something Tracy would definitely do. But it was really something I had to think about, and Michelle, I know too, and we had to have those
Mhm.
conversations about we're really putting ourselves out here, and is it really worth it
Yeah.
at the end of the day? And so I ask you, somebody who's been out there and certainly experienced some of that hate and criticism, is, Ginger, is it really worth it at the end of the
Mm,
day?
100%, because I I have things I want to say, and I have goals I want to achieve, and I have art I want to create, and I'm going to do it. And if someone wants to work against that art, they're going to work against it whether I'm in the space or not. And so I would rather be in the space doing my thing, and I'm just going to focus on what my goals are and what I want to put out into the world, and I want to do it the best I can. And am I going to make mistakes sometimes? Yes, absolutely. Are there things that I need to learn? Of course.
Mm.
And I'm going to constantly be open to trying to be better and to learn that and to make sure that I am staying authentic to the writer that I want to be.
Yeah, I think something very much to Tracy's point that came up in our conversations that I think also continues to be a theme on this podcast, and something I also hear, Ginger, when you described, kind of that first novel you put out there and kind of your bubble plus one, right? If you can just get that plus one reader,
Mhm.
is, it's overcoming, at least from my perspective, my own fear of rejection and of putting my authentic self out fully for somebody else to comment on, because there's value in representation. And I also, that's just kind of this
Mhm.
word that keeps coming up in my mind as you're discussing your art, given the types of themes, right, and the types of characters that you put out there. It's just, I've seen it happen time and again, even through the course of me telling my story and being fully honest and authentic about that story. I think, not only if I can just touch one person, right, in that theme of permission or representation to say,
Mhm.
like, you too, right, can live your full authenticity, then I think it's worth it. And it seems like your art has a much more massive reach than that on that theme of representation. Is that something that strikes you, or how do you feel about that?
I do, and it's also something that I try really hard to to write. This isn't really the right way to say it, but it's the best I can to write inclusively,
Hmm.
to write characters that reflect reality, and something that I'm working to learn as as a cisgender white woman, that there are some perspectives that I will need help with, that
Mhm.
that I need to take great care
Hmm.
creating, and that I need to make sure are accurate, or that might not be mine. And that's okay. It doesn't mean I can't have a character in a book that supports the one I'm writing that doesn't reflect the world we live in. But maybe I don't put the words in their mouth.
Hmm.
And that has been a constant learning journey. And I think that goes back to being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Is It's hard to tell yourself, okay, I'm not an expert here, and that's
Mhm.
okay. I'm not an expert here. Can I get help? Someone that is an expert, and can I? How do Is this mine to do? How do I do this the right way?
Hmm.
And that is a really powerful conversation that, especially I think more in the genre I write in romance than a lot of the other genres in literature, that has been a conversation a lot over the last 5 years, is how do we sort of treat those voices? How do we invite more voices into the genre?
Mm.
There has been just a lot of excitement about other voices coming into the romance genre. There's still not enough, but it is so wonderful to read those stories, to read a queer romance that
Mhm.
is written by someone who has walked in those shoes. One of my, and I'll talk about her a little bit later, but one of my favorite authors is a friend of mine, Kennedy Ryan, and she writes these just incredible romances about Black characters, and Black lives. And her her stories take me to places that I don't fully understand. And it's just, I feel when I come out of her books, I feel a little better, like a little more enriched, like a little, like, okay, yeah, yeah, I get that. And her romance is fantastic. So
That seems like that would be the goal, right? To use your art to leave people and the world in even a bit better place. I think you do more than that,
Yeah.
but I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe what I'd like to bring up, especially since you mentioned Kennedy, is where I think some of your art dovetails with a passion of yours, which, as I indicated earlier in your bio, is an autism advocacy. And so I know
yes,
you wrote a novel called How We Deal with Gravity. And it's a story,
yes.
right, about, I think, the struggles really of a single mom who's parenting a child with autism. And you
Mhm.
know, and then that's a meaty enough topic as it is, but you were able to weave in also a very hopeful and uplifting narrative around second chances. So can
Mhm.
you tell us, even if it relates to your passion for autism advocacy, or kind of how you came up with that plot and what that means to you as you wrote that novel?
Sure, I would love to. Okay, I'm gonna do the speed the speed background real quick here. I was a young journalist working for a magazine. I was 23 years old and had an opportunity to write one of the big feature stories for the magazine. And I thought, I want to write a story about what it's like to be a parent of a child with autism, which that was as far as my thinking went. Is I thought, I would love to tell this story. So I put some phone calls out there and reached out to several people, and everyone kept pointing me to this one person. Her name is Denise Resnick, and she is here in Arizona, and she is quite possibly the best human being I've ever met. But she was a mother of a child with autism, and she created this foundation to help other parents like her just have a place to go to get started, to find stuff. It started as the Southwest Autism Research Center, and it was just this one room sort of dumping ground of tools and resources. It has since grown to be this incredible resource and research center that is one of the biggest in the Southwest, and partners on research. And it really just helps people in Arizona, and people from out of state kind of start that journey of, when you have an autism diagnosis, how can you support this person in your family to be everything they can be, and to reach their fullest potential, and to have the tools that they need to give their gifts to the world. And it all started with this little naive 23-year-old wanting to do a story, and I spent a weekend with her and her family and fell in love. And I loved Matthew, her son. I loved the way their whole family just rallied around him to help him thrive. I loved her passion for making a difference. And then, as I tell people constantly, Denise has this unique way of, once you meet her, you now are her employee for life. And I started volunteering. Anything she needed written, I was there. She started another foundation in Arizona called First Place, which was teaching adults with autism how to live independently. She's one of those people that makes phone calls and people just don't say no. And maybe they say no, but she's relentless until they say yes. And I just, that was sort of my introduction into autism. Over the course of the last 25, I've had family diagnosed on the spectrum. I've had good friends with their children diagnosed. I've had adult friends come to realize that they are on the spectrum. It's interesting how much autism touches all of our lives in different ways. And as I was sort of, being a writer and going down this alley, that the idea of being a single parent of a child with autism was something that I had seen and experienced and watched from people that are close to me, as well as a lot of the stories I would tell for this group. And I got to see just these humans are warriors, and just the things that parents and caregivers would go through to create safe spaces for their child. And I wanted to put portrait out there so that way people would really understand, because there are a lot of people that don't really get what autism is, and they might be in a grocery store, and the opening scene of that book, How We Deal with Gravity, is the single mom in a grocery store right as her child is having the meltdown.
Mm.
And a lot of people will look at it and, walk by and be like, oh, such a, that child's a brat. Such an like bad parenting. They don't understand fully what's happening inside that little moment with the child and the parent. So I told that story. But I wanted to give not just those characters, but the people they embody, a fairy tale. I wanted them to have that happy ending. And that's one of the things that romance as a genre promises, is not a romance if you don't have a happily ever after. When it's a young adult romance, sometimes it's a happily ever for now, because you're probably not going to end with the wedding at 17. But in romance in general, that is sort of a rule of the genre, is you get that happily ever after. And it's so that way the readers of the genre, when they go into it, know, like, okay, I've had just the worst month
Mhm.
ever at work. I want to escape and I want to leave this book feeling good about the world. And that's what romance gives you. And I wanted to give that to those parents that, and those caregivers that
Mm.
are sitting there rocking their child with apples all over, the store that just got thrown from the display, and counting and just hoping they can
Mm.
get to the next 5 minutes. I wanted them to have that happily ever after.
Mm.
That's powerful.
I love that. And you talk about, the impact and what you want to give parents, the people living with autism. What do you hope the impact is on the reader in reading about some of these difficult themes like autism?
Yeah, the impact I hope is understanding. So that way, when you're out in public and you see that meltdown, or you see, maybe you are at a store and the person checking you out can't make eye contact, and they're a little different from you. They have some quirks. Maybe taking a moment to go, they might be
Mm.
on the spectrum, and look at what they're doing, and that's one of the
Yeah.
things people with autism can be the most incredible employees. And in some of the groups that I volunteered with, to see them get jobs that
Mm.
they've been in now for a decade, and to win Employee of the Month every month, because they want to be a part of that society and to
Mm.
contribute. But a lot of the things that go with autism sometimes are also diligence and perfectionism and repetition, maybe, and being like very satisfied and happy to do the work. It's been awesome to, like, both on the literary side and the volunteer side, to just help sort of put this and perpetuate the idea that these are people that can be just incredible assets to our society.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it just seems like it's so easy. I don't know, these days is probably not the right phrase to use, but right, so easy to, as you've described, look at somebody who appears, acts, or just feels different and kind of other,
Mhm,
that person. And again,
mhm,
it just makes me
mhm,
think about that theme of representation and really your endeavor in your writing to show the beauty, right? And the truth and the life behind the characters that you have
mhm.
that are dealing with some of these difficulties, but also exhibiting just so much of this beauty. And I just think it's a really great service in your disruption, kind of approach as an author that you're providing to your readers. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. That's on my goal list. So
Well, check.
check.
I agree. I agree with Michelle. Ginger, why do you think that characters like the characters you're describing, they may have autism or they're facing some other difficulty or trauma, why are they not normally included in mainstream work? Why do you think?
I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think you can boil it down to sort of historically, we don't like to be uncomfortable,
Mm.
just as humans, and so we don't want to we don't like change, and we don't want to kind of break that little barrier and bubble that we're living in and just the status quo. But it doesn't mean that if those stories aren't out there, that there aren't people that are going to seek them. Um,
Mm.
and sometimes as other people seek them and find them and amplify those voices, it gets those people that don't want to be uncomfortable, just curious enough to maybe explore.
Mm.
And I think that's what we can hope for.
Well, you're really, at the end of the day, you're driving social change. And do you believe that your storytelling and your writing, which is really, really helping drive social change, is connected to the success that you've had?
I hope so. I hope on some levels. Yeah. I mean, I do. I think it gives me a uniqueness, I hope. And maybe not terribly unique, because I know there are a lot of people that write great stories that go outside that box. And I don't want to take
Mm.
away from that. And I'm honored to just be a part of that. But yeah, I mean, I think I write something that's a little different that people have been hungry for. So
Mhm. I love it, and I love your genuine care for people is so evident.
Yeah, it's beautiful to hear. I mean, one of those words that comes to mind too is just hearing how giving and even humble you are in a space where you probably have every right to, sing your own praises. So I'm thankful that you're letting us do that for you a bit today.
Mm.
Also for
thank you.
Tim singing his praises, given that,
Yeah, that's right, Tim.
all right. So
Poor guy.
I know, poor thing. Let us know if he needs us to edit anything out, right?
Right.
But focusing a bit on your passion and again, and just hearing the beauty in what you give back through your art, but also through your advocacy. I did want to call out for our listeners that this episode should air in April. And April is Autism Acceptance Month. And so we're really
It is.
excited. Yeah, we're super excited to have your voice as part of our disruption discussion, really align well with Autism Acceptance Month. So, just really quick for any of our listeners who need a bit of the readout, Autism Acceptance Month, which I think has previously been referred to as Autism Awareness Month. Let's see, it is really an opportunity to celebrate, right, and promote the acceptance and the awareness around the condition of autism that actually occurs,
Mhm.
at least the stats that I have, are in about 1 in every 54 children. And that was, I think, some statistics back from
Mhm.
2020. So you might have an update for
It
us.
is. It is. I believe last I saw it's in the 30s
Oh,
now.
wow.
So,
Okay.
but it's a broad spectrum, and that's important for people to know that I have relatives that are severely impacted, and I also have
Mm,
family friends and relatives that are high functioning autism. Theirs comes out more socially. Just it's that not able to make on eye contact,
mm,
maybe staggered speech,
Mhm.
just difficulty making friendships. Those are some of the things that more on the high functioning side can be present, as opposed to someone who has
Mhm.
constant stemming and nonverbal. That's more on the
Sure,
extreme end.
sure. Well, I
mm,
really appreciate that. Again, maybe brief awareness from you is kind of how we all may be able to recognize individuals who are on that spectrum. But what I love even more is really the bulk of the conversation, Ginger, and you speaking to your experience with autism and autistic individuals in so much of how beautiful, right, that these individuals are and how much these individuals have to offer, and
Yeah,
so many of the incredibly
yeah.
positive characteristics and ways in which they weave into society. So I appreciate that from you. And I think maybe we should talk a little bit about where your passion is there and your advocacy. I know that you are working with, or maybe that's really the wrong way to put it. I think you were instrumental in an organization called Lift. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I would love to. So yes. So Lyft came about. It sort of started with my friendship with another author named Kennedy Ryan. She is an autism mommy. I came across her one day many years ago, I think 9 years now, on Twitter. And I just saw her bio that said, she was an autism mommy and an author, and that she was donating a portion of all of her royalties to the foundation that she started to help other parents,
mm.
low income parents of children with autism to have the services they need. I tweeted her and I kept saying, I think we should be friends. I love what you do. And then we just sort of developed this Twitter friendship that then, just blossomed into just a really great real life friendship and support for our writing. as well as support for, kind of the work we wanted to put out there in terms of autism. I like to tell people that Kennedy Ryan is probably 99% robot because I don't think she sleeps. And she is, if she puts an idea out there, it's coming. and she said, we should do something for Autism Acceptance Month, and let's come up with something. So the first year, her and I just kind of really created just sort of an awareness campaign that we shared with our fellow authors, and spread the word and got people invested with us for the entire month of April to just really like shout about autism, and that was really our goal. And we were just so overwhelmed and surprised to see how many people took to it, that it was inspiring. And we started to, in talking after that first month of April, we're like, I wonder if we could raise some money while we're doing this. So I like to tell people we are a charitable initiative because we don't want to ever touch any of that money. We don't want it to ever, we want it to go where it needs to go. So we're basically the megaphone, for, if you will, for autism awareness, and we have a charitable partner. So our charitable partner, for the last several years, is a group called Culture City, and the reason we selected them is because they have a national reach, so it touches people everywhere. And they have a huge variety of programs available, and they just do some really neat creative things to help support people with autism and on the spectrum to reach their fullest potential and to live their best lives. And so usually we determine what our contribution is going to help support that year through Culture City. So during the pandemic, it was helping low-income families just maintain through the pandemic and still pay for those services that they might need, or different services they might need in a pandemic setting. We have supported their iPad program, which is it buys iPads for children with autism that they can use in therapies, in learning how to do certain skills. We've created scholarship funds for low-income families, for those with autism, to get training, services, therapies, just a wide variety of things to fill the need where the need is. Last year we topped $100,000 in the money raised.
Great.
And again, I will say Kennedy Ryan, when she puts an idea out there, it happens. So she wants to beat that number this year, and we're all like, okay, we're gonna figure out how to do that. So what Lift is yes, we shout about autism for the month of April. We shout about it all year long, but we really shout about it in April. And we've created this online auction of all things romance genre. So we get signed books donated from authors. We get, sometimes they put together gift boxes full of, swag items, cool book bags and stuff, along with, maybe several copies of of a series, all signed. And we have hundreds of items. And we really work hard to go find those things that people really want and are hungry for. Sometimes it's, we've started doing Zoom chats. So you could have a Zoom chat with an author that you've been on, or a Zoom chat with a narrator, because people love audiobooks and they love to hear the voice of the person behind the audio. And some of these have garnered $1,000 bids.
Oh, wow.
It's incredible. And so we open the catalog. This year I have my notes that I'm checking on to make sure I give you the right dates. April 3rd is when the catalog will open for viewing, so people can start to see stuff that's added. And we add items up until the very last minute. And then it is open for bidding April 24th through April 28th, from April 24th, 8 a.m. Eastern Time to 5 p.m. April 28th Eastern Time. And I have to tell you, that last 2 hours, especially that last hour, we can see things on the back end, and it's usually Kennedy, myself, and then we have an assistant, Melissa, who is really like the great powerful Oz that makes all of the gears work. And we watch those donations and the bids just climb and climb and climb and climb and climb. And in that last hour, you can see like a $25,000
Wow.
swing sometimes, and we're usually crying and we're clapping and we're dancing in embarrassing ways and just like counting down the minutes, and we're like, if only we had 10 more seconds. And to see what it closes at. And it's just this incredible, beautiful thing that the romance reading community has sort of created. And it's funny, I forget, I want to say we're on our seventh one. I don't have that in front of me. I'm going to say seventh, but
Yeah.
but this will be the seventh one. And it's if people want to check it out, you can go to lift for, so it's like an actual for, liftforautism.com. And that's where you can get all of the information. You can also find it on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram, but really you can find all the links on the website. You can get liftwear, which has become sort of a popular thing. We change the logo every year, so that way it's always, every campaign is a different logo in case you would like to buy one every year. And all of the proceeds from that go directly to Culture City. We do direct donations because some people don't want to bid, but they want to support the cause, and they can do a direct donation to Culture City that counts towards our goal. And it's a really cool thing. And we've really worked hard to lift and incorporate real voices of autism. So we have some authors that are on the spectrum that not only donate books but also share their stories that we put out there. If you go to the website, you can see some of the videos we've done with them in the past. One of my personal favorite, and I love her books and I love her personage, Talia Hibbert writes just incredible stories, just great romances. And she's on the spectrum, and she just brings a really great uniqueness to it. And it's just a fantastic like celebration of reading and acceptance and the power of what collectively we can do.
Community. I love it.
Thank you for letting me have my lift.
Oh, well, I don't know what I want to respond to first. I know Tracey wants to, but I got my voice in. So you have to give me just a minute. First of all, can we get an invite to the watch party? Because that sounds like the best 2 hours I may spend in my life. So I'm just going to put that plug out there. And then number two, what I will be bidding on is breakfast with Ginger. Bonus points. I think bonus points if we get 10 too. I don't know. Is that probably not possible?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll have to work to get him out of the cave.
But no, and then of course, none of that was really joking, but in all seriousness, we'll absolutely be able to include all of this information in our show notes for our listeners. And then I know, don't mean to speak for you, Tracey, but I think I can in this respect. We will be promoting Lyft as well as Autism Acceptance Month through our social channels. As well as through the Disruption Podcast social channels as well. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll help lift that voice too.
Yeah. And Ginger, thank you for lifting others up. Just mentioning the other authors. You're just, you're such a kind soul, and you're all about, investing in other people. And that's very much apparent. So I think it's amazing that you're taking the time, and we should put that in the show notes too, as the two authors that Ginger celebrated in this episode. But
and you know what? I will send you a list of authors on the spectrum. I would love it if you could include that too, because there are just some really great voices out there, and I would love to share.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. We'll totally do that. And thank you, Ginger, for the conversation. And thank you to all the disruptors who are listening to this episode out there. Ginger, we're so grateful for your courage, your bravery. I'm just, so thankful for you being such a genuinely kind person and thoughtful, and just so thoughtful in everything that you do. And just you're disrupting the way young people are given insight into these tough topics that you tackle through your work and through your writing. And thank you for including the topics like mental health and specifically like autism. These are important conversations to be having, and you're helping not only be a part of that conversation, but really to spark that conversation with others. So we'll put all the links, we'll put whatever information, Ginger, that you want us to put out there. We'll definitely put it out there. And then I'll kick it over to Michelle, before I wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are all so grateful for the disruptors listening in to this conversation, because we know that there are just innumerable ways that we can all partner together in this real sense of community, right? That I think we have, and that we're also trying to create, to be part of the solution to a lot of these tough topics and issues. So, to that end, to our disruptors, we will be back in the next 2 weeks with another disruptive conversation. You can expect nothing less. And in the meantime, you can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else where you may find your podcasts. Of course, we'd love feedback. So if you have any constructive or just glowing feedback for us, please feel free to leave that. And we'd also love a review on Apple. 5 stars is always lovely, but you do you. And we just look forward to continuing our disruption conversations and continuing to lift voices like Ginger's.
Yeah, and this is where we do our call to action. So, Ginger, would you like to provide a call to action? Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I mean, if you can find all of my books on all of the usual places. Search Apple Books, search Amazon, Kobo if you're a Kobo reader, Google. But more importantly, I would like you to check out liftforautism.com.
Love it. Love it. Well, calling all champions, disruptors, let's assemble, let's convene. This is the Disruption Podcast, a podcast about activating big, bold change. So, are we ready to disrupt? Here we go.